Hey everyone, this is HFY Galactic Empire Fall. Stories forged by humans, not machines. Because HFY is our story. I'm Orion Thane. Subscribe and witness what comes next. The chair had been moved 3 millimeters to the left. Lena Voss noticed it, because the line in the floor no longer met the rear leg cleanly. The seam ran through the chamber in a straight black mark, cut into pale composite tile, and every other chair crossed it the same way. This one did not. Its back was still centered beneath the unlit crest on the far wall, but the legs sat just off the seam, enough to disturb the pattern. She stopped beside the long table and looked at it without sitting down. Around her, the chamber carried its usual small noises. Air through the vents. A low transformer hum in the wall panels. Somewhere behind the northern partition, a relay clicked twice and did not click again. The overhead lights stayed at their morning level, bright enough to read skin tone, dim enough to flatter old stone and older metal. The station's designers had understood that negotiations depended as much on surfaces as on law. Lena set her paper folder on the table, flattened its edge with 2 fingers, then reached for the chair and nudged it back into line. The rear leg settled over the seam. She stood there another second, checking the angles. Then she took her seat. Across from her, the place markers were already arranged in a neat arc. Delegation of the Huron Compact, observers of the Talon Reach, Maritime Council of Ivra, and at the center on the far side, one blank brass stand with no name set into it. Behind that stand, a single chair, taller than the rest, dark wood instead of molded composite. No one had used it in more than 200 years. The seat had been kept at every interspecies council since the ratification era. It was not symbolic in the decorative sense. No flowers. No inscription carved for visitors. It remained because no one had been willing to remove it and be remembered as the one who did. Humanity had signed the first transit accords, mapped the safe corridors around collapsed stars, then gone out past charted space in fragments. Colonies vanished. Fleet records broke. Embassies closed one by one. Not in war. Not in one event clean enough to tell as a story. They had simply thinned into rumor, archive, debt, and inherited law. So the seat stayed. Lena opened the folder. Inside were her briefing sheets, printed rather than projected because she preferred the drag of paper beneath her thumb. Digital text invited constant revision. Paper forced a shape to things. The first page was a summary of procedural concerns for the afternoon convocation. The second listed the agenda revisions requested overnight by the Huron Compact. The third was a private memorandum from station administration, 1 paragraph only. Inspectors found no access breach. Chamber 9 was sealed from 2210 to 5:40 station time. Internal motion logs show no activity. She read that line again, then turned the page over though there was nothing on the back. At 7 o'clock, the side door opened and Ilian Reeve came in carrying a narrow tool case in one hand and a ceramic flask in the other. He was tall in the practical way of people who spent their lives in maintenance corridors. Long spine, spare movements, no wasted attention. He wore station gray with the sleeves folded once. No insignia except access tabs at the wrist. He closed the door with his heel, crossed to the service console, and set the tool case down without looking at Lena. The chamber sensors were right, he said. Nothing failed. Lena kept one finger between the pages of her folder. Good morning to you too. He unscrewed the flask, poured coffee into the metal cap, and drank from it while reading the console display. The door seals held. Air volume steady. No pressure shift. No panel breach. No thermal trace inconsistent with a night cycle. Then someone came in without existing. That would be one theory. She watched him over the edge of the folder. You've had worse. I've had more measurable. He moved toward the blank seat. Not quickly. Not cautiously either. He approached it the way he might approach a valve assembly that had started making the wrong sound. He crouched, checked the floor seam, touched the rear leg, and looked at the base. No drag marks, he said. Lena closed the folder. It was offline when I arrived. I believe you. You sound surprised that I noticed. He stood. You notice things when they fit your preferences. She almost smiled. Instead, she slid the memorandum across the table. He did not take it. He read it upside down from where he stood, then looked toward the upper corners of the room where the motion lenses were housed behind smoked glass. Logs will be local, he said. I want the raw buffer, not the summary. You think administration compressed something by mistake? I think summaries are what people write after they've decided what matters. That was close enough to philosophy that it would have sounded strange from anyone else. From him, it came flat, almost incidental, as if he were identifying a fault in a circuit path. Lena rose and walked to the blank chair. Up close, the wood showed faint scratches along the arms, polished smooth again over the decades. There was no plaque, no seal. The upholstery was dark blue, the original fabric replaced at least once, but matched carefully to archive images. The seat cushion dipped in the center by less than a centimeter. She placed 2 fingertips on the armrest and then took them away. Do you think one of the delegates is trying to be clever? She asked. Ilian shook his head. Not with station cameras in the room. Then staff. Staff know better. Because they respect history. Because they like employment. That did earn a brief change at the corner of her mouth. He noticed and returned to the console. Outside the chamber windows, the gas giant took up half the view, pale bands wrapped in storm systems too wide to comprehend as weather. Cargo beacons moved in slow lines beyond it, tiny as insects against reflected cloud light. Lena had lived on stations long enough that planets felt less permanent than schedules. You watched them turn, and they were always in motion. Paper stayed where it was put. She gathered her notes into a tighter stack. The afternoon session will be full, she said. If this becomes a story before then, the Reach observers will turn it into an omen. The Compact will call it sabotage, and the Maritime Council will request a legal review of furniture. Then we should avoid that. I'm glad we agree on something. He glanced at her. We agree often. We arrive there by different routes. That seems efficient. A chime sounded once from the corridor. Not an alarm. A docking notice relayed station-wide in the background systems. Lena checked the wall clock. The first of the delegations would begin arriving within 2 hours. Staff would come soon to prepare translation nodes and refresh the water service. The chamber would fill with layered politeness. Everyone would see the seat. Most would avoid looking at it more than once. She imagined them noticing it had been moved, then wondering whether they were the only one who noticed. That was how rooms began doing work before any person spoke. Ilian opened the tool case and removed a slim field scanner. He passed it over the chair in a slow grid. The display lit his wrist and the underside of his jaw. He checked the back, the seat, the legs, then the floor around it. Nothing added, he said. No emitters, no residue, no tag dust. Tag dust. Trace powder from freight handling, usually. If someone moved it wearing work gloves. Couldn't someone have moved it barehanded? Yes. Then nothing added means very little. It means a little more than nothing. She took that for concession. A second door opened at the rear of the chamber. A service attendant stepped in with a tray of clean glasses, saw them both by the old chair, and hesitated. Am I early? The attendant asked. No, Lena said. Right on time. The attendant crossed to the sideboard. Glass touched glass in small, careful sounds. Lena watched the reflection in the dark window panel behind the board. Shoulders held too straight, chin lowered, attention split between assigned work and the silent fact of the empty seat. News moved fast on stations, even when no one spoke. Especially then. Ilian finished his scan, powered down the unit, and packed it away. Then he did something Lena had seen him do only a few times in all the years they had worked the same problems from opposite ends. He stood still and let the room sit around him. Not indecision. Calculation. The motion logs, he said after a moment. If they show no entry, then either the sensors failed without failing, or the chair was moved before the room sealed. By whom? Someone with pre-close access. That list is long. Not that long. Lena turned to the side console and called up the previous evening's chamber booking. The air above the panel brightened with names and timestamps. There had been a diplomatic rehearsal at 1800 hours. Translation calibration at 2010. Cleaning cycle at 2100 hours. Seal confirmation at 2210. Rehearsal team, translation staff, cleaners, security, she said. Plus admin. And anyone wearing admin. She looked at him. You're improving my mood. It's unwise to let it rise too far before the delegates arrive. The attendant finished arranging the glasses, set a sealed water carafe beside them, and left without asking further questions. The door hissed shut. The room returned to its filtered quiet. Lena enlarged the personnel list and sent it to her private slate. I'll speak to admin first. Quietly. Quiet is best. You say that as if you trust people to remain so. I don't. That's why timing matters. He walked once around the chair, this time not scanning, just observing. His hand paused over the backrest, but did not touch it. Then he stepped away and looked at Lena. What do you know about why the seat was preserved? He asked. She blinked once at the question. The official reason, the useful one. Lena considered. On the table, the edge of her paper folder had lifted slightly from the air current. She pressed it flat again. The official reason is continuity, she said. The early accord was signed by human representatives. Removing the seat would imply the accords had ended with them. And the unofficial, she looked toward the chair. No one ever admitted it openly, she said. But for the first 4 decades after the dispersal, every council expected a human delegation to return. Not eventually. Soon. Every meeting was set as if the door might open late and someone would step in apologizing for transit delay. Ilian said nothing. The seat remained because people kept thinking one more season, she went on. Then one more year. After that it became embarrassing to confess they had been waiting. So they called it tradition. He absorbed that the way he absorbed readings, without visible judgment. That kind of waiting leaves marks, he said. On the table, her slate chimed with the first return packet from administration. She opened the file. Access roster. Authentication stamps. Maintenance notes. One name pulled her eye at once, not because it was surprising, but because it was not. Translation technician male, she said. Entered at 2012. Cleared at 2044. The calibration report says node 4 had drift. Ilian held out his hand. She passed him the slate. He read, scrolled once, then stopped. What? He tilted the screen so she could see a small line near the bottom. A manual note had been appended to the automated report. Seat alignment verified before departure. They both looked at the chair. Lena took the slate back and read it again, slowly, as if the words might settle into some more ordinary meaning if given time. But the line stayed what it was. Not generic chamber check. Not final arrangement verified. Specifically the seat. Why would a translation technician note that? She asked. Because they noticed it. Or because they moved it. He did not answer. The wall clock advanced a minute. Somewhere outside in the corridor, a cart rolled past with one wheel slightly out of true, ticking at regular intervals over the expansion joints. Lena listened until the sound faded. Then she went to the chair and crouched beside it, bringing her eyes level with the seat cushion. A faint depression marked the center. Not new. Impossible to tell. The fabric held light differently there, worn by age or pressure or careful restoration. She placed her hand flat on the floor beside the front leg. The composite tile was cool. Suppose someone moved it during calibration, she said. Why move it back halfway? Why leave it wrong by so little? Ilian closed the tool case. Maybe they didn't leave it wrong, he said. Maybe they set it exactly where they thought it belonged. Lena looked up at him. That was when the overhead lights dimmed by a fraction and returned. Not enough to trigger alarm. Not enough even for most people to notice. But the reflection on the window shifted, and for a moment the blank chair seemed occupied only by shadow and angle. Then the light stabilized, and it was empty again. Neither of them spoke. Ilian checked the console. Lena stayed crouched by the chair, one hand on the floor, the other resting lightly against the wood. In the silence, the station hum seemed to separate into layers. Vents, current, distant engines, a small intermittent tap from somewhere in the wall. At the console, Ilian read whatever had appeared and did not immediately turn around. What is it? Lena asked. He lifted his eyes from the display. The chamber registered weight, he said. Her hand remained on the floor. How much? He looked at the number once more before answering. Not enough for a person, he said. Too much for nothing. Ilian did not repeat the number. He left the console, came back to the chair, and crouched where Lena had been a moment earlier. The floor seam ran under the front leg and into the base of the table, black against pale composite. He set 2 fingers against the tile, as if he might feel the reading still there. Lena stood. "How long ago?" she asked. 8 seconds before the light shift. "Transient?" "Yes." "How much?" He looked up at her this time. 32 kilos. The figure sat between them. Too precise to ignore. Too small for a seated adult. Too large for any routine calibration artifact. Not the kind of error a chamber like this produced without leaving other signs. Lena went to the console beside him. The system graph showed a clean flat line for the room's baseline mass estimate, then a brief rise centered on the chair position, then an immediate return to 0. No secondary spikes. No corresponding door vent. No air displacement warning. No unauthorized signal handshake. She scrolled back through the last 2 hours. Nothing. "Sensor fault," she said, though not with conviction. Ilian leaned closer to graph. "Then it's a selective one. Can a floor pick up localized weight independently?" "It estimates through flex response and support load. Not exact enough for legal metrology. More than enough to tell when someone sits down." Lena looked toward the chair. It remained what it had always been. Dark wood, blue fabric, one armrest slightly more worn than the other. She noticed the stitching now, a careful repair at the back seam done by hand rather than machine. Someone sometime had decided it was worth preserving beyond procedure. The clock moved again. Another minute gone. "The delegates will be here soon," she said. Ilian rose. "Then we need simpler questions. You say that like they exist." He ignored the comment and opened a diagnostic panel. Who had access? What they touched? Whether the anomaly repeats. And if it does, then it becomes less useful to call it an anomaly. He sent a retrieval request through the station net, then stepped aside so she could see. Rollins buffer from 20 to 2100 hours. Environmental logs. Maintenance subchannel. He requested the chair's archive entry too, which surprised her. "That's not relevant," she said. "It might be. It's furniture. It's old furniture in a room where old things are treated differently." Lena folded her arms and watched the transfer indicator move in slow increments. "I'm going to find mail. Take a recorder. I know how interviews work." "That isn't why." She looked at him. "If the technician says something precise," he said, "you'll want the exact wording later." She reached for her slate. "You make people sound like systems." "They are, if you need to know where they fail." "And what am I?" He shut the diagnostic panel and latched it. "You're the part that gets them to keep talking." That was likely the closest he came to compliments. Lena took it without comment, picked up her paper folder, then set it down again. Too formal for what came next. She took only the slate and left the chamber by the side door. The corridor outside was brighter, less carefully composed. Service carts along one wall. A cleaner replacing filter cloth in a vent intake. 2 security officers speaking in low tones near the central lift, both of them straightening when they saw her, then try not to look as if they had straightened. Station roomer, she thought, had already reached cruising speed. She walked past them without slowing and took the east lift to translation. The translation suite occupied a ring of offices around a central acoustic lab. Glass walls, muted floor, screens hung at angles for 3 species with incompatible visual habits. Technicians were already at work preparing live mediation stacks for the convocation. Lena passed stations full of quiet concentration. Hands on keys, mouths testing phonetic drift, eyes moving between language families no human throat could naturally produce. Mail was in booth 3, replacing a contact strip along the edge of a portable node. Mid-30s, narrow shoulders, precise hands. He looked up when Lena stopped in the doorway and immediately placed the strip down parallel to the table edge before saying anything. That small act told her enough to begin. "Counselor," he said. "Technician." She stepped inside. The booth smelled faintly of warmed plastic and citrus cleaner. On the table lay tools arranged by size, not scattered. A good sign. People who anticipated disorder usually also anticipated consequences. "I need 2 minutes," she said. He glanced once through the glass wall toward the main suite. "Of course." Lena did not sit. She remained near the doorway, casual enough to suggest no formal inquiry, direct enough to prevent him from pretending this was social. She lifted the slate and began recording openly. You filed a calibration note for Chamber 9 last night. Yes. You wrote, seat alignment verified before departure. He nodded once. Why that wording? Mail touched the portable node, but did not lift it. Because the seat was out of alignment when I arrived. By how much? A few millimeters. Slightly left of floor center. The same deviation it had this morning. His eyes came to hers, then moved away. I wouldn't know this morning's position. But you corrected it. Yes. Why include the note? He considered the question for longer than most people would if the answer were simple. Then he said, because I had to touch it. Lena let the silence sit. Beyond the booth, someone laughed once in the main suite and stopped quickly, as if remembering where they were. You're not prohibited from touching chamber furniture, she said. No. Then why note it? Mail's fingers adjusted the contact strip by less than a millimeter. The chair didn't feel loose. She waited. When I moved it, he said, there was resistance. Not friction. More like, he searched for a cleaner word and did not find one. Like correcting something that had been set deliberately. By whom? I don't know. Was anyone else with you? No. No one entered while you were there? No. Did you sit in it? The question landed harder than the others. She could tell by the stillness in his right hand. No, he said. Did you consider it? He looked at her then, not offended, measuring how much to hold back. It would have been an absurd thought, he said. But you had it. His jaw shifted once. Yes. What? He glanced at the glass wall again, to the room beyond, the technicians, the work, ordinary things that could not help him. Then back to Lena. I was calibrating node 4, he said. The room was quiet. I checked the placement markers and saw the chair offline. I remember thinking someone from cleaning must have brushed it. I crossed the room, put my hand on the backrest, and had the distinct sense that I was interrupting something. He stopped. What something? I don't know. That's not useful. It's what happened. Lena watched him. The careful tools. The aligned strip. The effort in his face not to dramatize what he clearly understood would sound dramatic. Tell me exactly, she said. He nodded. The chair was offline. I want to move it. Before I touched it, I thought, very clearly for no reason I can defend, that someone had only just stood up. The room beyond the booth kept moving. A tech carried a headset past the glass. Another bent over a console, speaking into a throat mic life, continued with insulting normality. Lena did not lower the slate. And then, I moved the chair into alignment. Did anything else occur? A light fluctuation. Brief. Node 4 registered a translation ghost line. She felt that at once. What line? He opened a nearby terminal and pulled the archive calibration record. Data, noise, phoneme checks, waveform ladders. He isolated a half-second glitch from the feed and sent it to her slate. It's meaningless, he said. At least I assume it is. The system tried to resolve it against stored language roots and failed. Lena looked at the notation. Not words. Not even clean phonetics. Just a cluster of marks the software had refused to classify, then tagged as non-attributable vocal residue. Why wasn't this in your report? Because a ghost line during calibration is normal. The chair was not. He was right. Technical systems were full of almost events. False echoes, cross-bleed, memory shadows, and old equipment. Most of them meant nothing. But meaning was often decided afterward, when something else had already made a person uneasy. Lena ended the recording. Do not discuss this, she said. I haven't. You will also send me the raw node file. I already forwarded it to Chamber Diagnostics when they requested logs. That meant Ilian had likely seen it already or would within minutes. One more question, she said. When you left the room, was the chair centered? Yes. Exactly. Mail hesitated. Not exactly, he said. I thought it was. I checked twice. But when I reached the door, I looked back and had the impression it had shifted again. Did it? I can't prove it. That isn't what I asked. He exhaled through his nose, a quiet, measured release. I think so, he said. Lena thanked him and left before the booth could turn confessional. On the lift down, she replayed his recording once. Not because the content was unclear. Because tone mattered. He had not embellished. He had not searched for effect. They made it worse. By the time she returned to Chamber 9, station staff had begun final preparation. Water service complete. Translation nodes installed along the table edge. 2 attendants placing thin black writing pads at each delegation seat. The blank chair remained undisturbed at the far side, centered now with maddening correctness. Ilian stood near the rear service hatch, speaking to a security supervisor. He finished as Lena entered. The supervisor left at once. "Well," he asked. She handed him the slate with Mail's recording cued. He listened without expression. Only once did his eyes move to the old chair. "Node ghost line," he said when it ended. He didn't report it as important. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it is now. He returned the slate and led her toward the side console, away from the attendants. "The lens buffer came through," he said. "No person enters. No visible movement. But at 2031 the light around the chair changes for 4 frames. Because unknown, not station flicker. Localized." He enlarged the clip. The chamber appeared empty, still, indifferent. Then, for 4 frames only, the space above the chair distorted by a degree so slight the eye almost excused it as compression error. Not a figure, not a shape. More like the air had remembered a different outline. Then nothing. Lena felt the back of her neck tighten, though she did not move a hand to it. Could it be reflection? From what? Passing traffic outside. Vector is wrong. She looked again. And the archive entry? That was when he handed her another file. The chair's preservation record was old enough to have been transcribed from physical books. Repairs, fabric replacement, wood treatment, sealant applications. Most routine. One line, however, had been flagged during digitization because its original phrasing resisted modern taxonomy. She read it once. Then again. Chair retained under Continuity Provision 7. Not to be occupied except by claimant or recognized human authority. Lena lifted her eyes slowly. "There are no humans here," she said. Ilian did not answer. At the far end of the chamber, one of the attendants approached the blank chair with a cloth, intending perhaps to dust the armrest. Before the cloth touched wood, the attendant stopped. "Look down. Step back half a pace." Lena crossed the room at once. "What is it?" The attendant pointed, not speaking. On the blue fabric of the seat cushion, visible only when the light caught at a low angle, was a shallow indentation. Fresh, not deep, not enough to show weight in any theatrical sense, but present, a shape pressed into the center, smooth at the edges, as though something had rested there briefly and risen without disturbing the fabric grain around it. No one in the room moved. Ilian came up beside her and, without touching the chair, checked the floor monitor on his wrist. "Now," Lena said. He looked at the reading. "Yes," he said. "Now. How much?" He held her gaze for a fraction too long. 32 kilos again. Outside in the corridor, the first delegation had arrived. Their footsteps approached in a measured group, accompanied by the soft multilingual prompts of reception staff guiding them toward the chamber doors. Lena looked at the indentation, then at the blank brass marker in front of it, then at the doors that were about to open. "Don't remove the chair," she said. "I wasn't going to. Don't cover the seat." He glanced once at the approaching entrance, calculating outcomes as quickly as she was. "If they see this, they will." She straightened. "So we decide what they see it as." The chamber doors unlocked with a quiet internal click. The doors opened without ceremony. Sound entered first. Fabric against fabric. A soft shift of weight as the leading figures adjusted their pace from corridor stride to chamber pace. Translation nodes activated along the table edge, each emitting a faint, almost polite tone as they linked. Lena stepped away from the chair by a measured distance, neither hiding it nor presenting it. Ilian moved toward the rear console, positioning himself where he could see both the room and the diagnostic feed without drawing attention. The first delegation crossed the threshold in a control line. 3 from the Huron compact, their posture exact, movements economical. Behind them, 2 observers from the Talon Reach, eyes already moving over the chamber with habitual curiosity. The Maritime Council of Ivra followed last, slower, as if each step required agreement between body and law. No one spoke immediately. They entered, paused, and performed the small mutual acknowledgments that replaced greetings in rooms where language had to be shared carefully. Heads inclined, hands raised to chest height and lowered again. A choreography learned over years of meetings that had to begin without friction. Lena watched their eyes. It happened in sequence. The Huron delegates looked to the table, to their assigned seats, to Lena, then, briefly, to the far side where the blank chair stood. One of them held the look half a second longer than the others, then moved on. The Talon observers noticed the chair first. Their gaze lingered, not on the seat itself, but on the air above it, as if they were testing the space for something not immediately visible. One of them adjusted a thin instrument at their wrist. The Maritime Council arrived last and saw everything at once. Their lead representative slowed, just enough that the person behind nearly collided, then corrected without comment. No one spoke. Lena let the silence sit just long enough to establish control, then inclined her head. "Welcome," she said. The translation nodes rendered her voice across frequencies and structures without visible effort. The word became several things at once, all of them close enough to be accepted. The delegations moved to their places. Chairs slid against the floor in restrained motions. Paper pads were aligned. Devices were placed parallel to table edges. One of the Talon observers paused before sitting, glancing again toward the empty seat, then lowered themselves into their assigned position with visible care. Ilian watched the floor monitor. The baseline held steady. No additional weight registered. Lena took her seat at the near end of the table. Her paper folder lay where she had left it, edge flattened, pages aligned. She rested her hand on it for a moment, then removed it. "We will begin with the revised agenda," she said. "The Huron Compact has requested a change in sequence for transit corridor arbitration." A Huron delegate nodded once. "Correct." Their voice carried cleanly through the translation nodes. It was a control voice. No inflection beyond necessity. Lena inclined her head. "We will address that first." She did not look at the chair again. The discussion began. It moved as these discussions always did. Careful, incremental, each statement placed with intent. Transit rights, corridor maintenance, liability for unmapped drift. The language was precise enough to feel almost physical, like components being fitted into a structure that would hold under pressure or fail in ways no one could afford. Lena listened, spoke when required, directed attention, balanced positions. Across from her, the Talon observer adjusted their wrist instrument again. Ilian saw it from the rear. He stepped closer to the console, bringing the feed into sharper resolution. The instrument emitted a low-frequency scan, not strong enough to trigger chamber alerts, but sufficient to detect minor field variations. He checked the system. No anomalies. The observer lowered their hand. The meeting continued. Minutes passed. The initial tension of entry settled into the more familiar tension of negotiation. Words accumulated. Positions clarified. The room found its working rhythm. Then, without announcement, the overhead lights dimmed again. Not a failure. Not a fluctuation broad enough to suggest system instability. Just a subtle reduction, localized, centered on the far side of the table. The delegates did not stop speaking, but they noticed. Lena felt it in the shift of their posture. The fractional hesitation before the next sentence. The way eyes moved, not toward the light itself, but toward the place where the light had changed. The chair. She did not turn. Ilian watched the monitor. The baseline rose, not abruptly, gradually, as if something were being placed, not dropped. 20 kilos, 24, 28, 32. It held. The indentation on the seat deepened by a fraction. Not enough to be obvious from across the table. Enough that Lena, who had seen it before, could measure the difference. No one spoke of it. The Huron delegate continued their statement on corridor arbitration, voice unchanged. The translation nodes carried it across the table, into the room, into the devices recording every word for later review. Lena listened. She waited. The number held. 32 kilos. The Talon observer's instrument flickered once, then stabilized. Their hand hovered over it, then withdrew. The Maritime Council representative adjusted their papers, aligning edges that were already aligned. No one acknowledged the chair. That was the rule of rooms like this. You did not give shape to what you could not categorize. Lena let the Huron delegate finish. Then she spoke. "We will pause for clarification," she said. It was a neutral phrase. It meant nothing and everything. A way to stop without admitting the reason. The delegates inclined their heads. The room held. Lena stood. Not abruptly, not slowly. At the pace of someone who had decided on a course of action and would follow it without explanation. She walked along the table, past the Huron delegation, past the Talon observers, toward the far side. No one stopped her. Ilian shifted his position slightly, bringing himself into a line where he could see both Lena and the monitor without turning his head. The number held. 32 kilos. Lena reached the chair. She did not touch it immediately. She stood beside it, looking down at the seat. From this angle, the indentation was clear. Not dramatic, not deep, but present in a way that could not be dismissed as fabric memory. She extended her hand, paused, then placed her fingertips on the armrest. The wood was cool. No warmth, no resistance, just material. She let her hand rest there for a moment, then withdrew it. "Under Continuity Provision 7, she said, her voice carrying across the room without amplification, "this seat is reserved." The translation nodes rendered the sentence. The delegates listened. No one interrupted. Lena looked at the blank brass marker. Not to be occupied except by claimant or recognized human authority. The words settled. Ilian watched the monitor. The number did not change. 32 kilos. The Talon observer leaned forward slightly. "Counselor," they said, "are you suggesting—" "I'm stating the provision," Lena said. She did not raise her voice. She did not look at them. The room held its breath in the way rooms do, when no one acknowledges that they are doing so. The Huron delegate spoke. "There is no claimant present." "Agreed," Lena said. "Then the provision is not engaged." "Agreed." The Maritime Council representative adjusted their papers again. "Then why reference it?" Lena turned her head slightly, just enough to bring the edge of the chair into her peripheral vision. "Because the condition for engagement may not be limited to visible presence." The words were careful. Not a claim, not a denial. A statement that left space. Ilian watched the monitor. The number shifted. 33 kilos. He frowned. Not visibly, just enough that Lena, who knew him, would have recognized it if she had been looking. The shift held for 2 seconds, then returned to 32. The Talon observer's instrument flickered again. They looked at it, then at the chair, then at Lena. "Counselor," they said, "if there is an unregistered presence." "There is a registered weight," Lena said. She did not elaborate. The room absorbed that. Registered, not assumed, not imagined, measured. The Huron delegate's eyes moved to the chair again, longer this time. "Is the chamber compromised?" Ilian spoke from the rear. "No." His voice was calm, flat, definitive. No breach. No unauthorized entry. No system fault identified. The Maritime Council representative looked between them. "Then what are we observing?" Lena did not answer immediately. She let the question sit, not to create drama, to allow it to exist without being filled too quickly. Then she said, "A condition that has not yet been defined." The translation nodes rendered it. The words became several things at once, all of them insufficient. The room held. The number held. 32 kilos. Outside, through the chamber windows, a cargo beacon shifted its trajectory by a degree, adjusting for drift. Inside, no one moved. Then, very slowly, the indentation on the seat changed. Not deeper, not lighter, different, as if the weight had shifted its position. No sound accompanied it. No visible cause. Just a subtle alteration in the fabric. Lena saw it. Ilian saw it. The Talon observer's instrument registered a brief spike, then returned to baseline. The Huron delegate's hand, resting on the table, tightened by a fraction. The Maritime Council representative stopped aligning their papers. No one spoke. The chair remained. The seat remained. The weight remained. And for the first time since the doors had opened, the room no longer felt like a place where people were waiting to begin. It felt like something had already started. No one returned to the agenda. The table held its shape, papers, devices, hands placed where they had been, but the work had slipped out of it. The translation nodes remained active, quietly maintaining links that no one used. Lena stayed where she was beside the chair. She did not sit. She did not touch it again. Across the table, the her and delegate shifted their posture by a degree that suggested readiness rather than comfort. The talent observer's wrist instrument remained still now, held deliberately away from the table surface. The Maritime Council representative had stopped adjusting their papers entirely. Ilian watched the floor monitor. The reading had stabilized again at 32 kilos. No drift, no variation. He adjusted the sensitivity by a small margin, then restored it. The number did not change. Lena spoke. "We will suspend formal discussion." It was not a request. The translation nodes carried it cleanly. The delegates inclined their heads, one by one. No one objected. There was nothing to object to. Lena moved back to her seat, but did not sit. She placed one hand on the table, fingers resting against the edge of her paper folder. The edge lifted slightly under the airflow, then settled again when she pressed it flat. "Station protocol does not account for this condition," she said. The Huron delegate responded. "Then protocol must be adapted." "Agreed." The talent observer spoke next. "Adaptation requires definition." Lena inclined her head. "We are in the process of forming one." The Maritime Council representative looked toward the chair. "Until then," they said, "we are operating without precedent." Yes, that word held more weight than the number on the monitor. Ilian stepped closer to the console, bringing the environmental feed into view again. He overlaid the motion logs with a lens buffer, aligning timestamps to the millisecond. No new entries, no movement, no change. He isolated the area around the chair and increased the sampling rate. The system complied. The data became denser. Still nothing. He turned his attention to the translation nodes. Each unit recorded ambient audio as part of its calibration loop. Not for content, but for drift correction. The buffers were small, constantly overwritten. He accessed the last 30 seconds. The room's sound profile appeared. Airflow, fabric movement, low-frequency vibration from the station's outer ring. He expanded the waveform. There, a deviation. Not a voice, not a word, a pattern. He isolated it and played it back through a narrow filter. The sound was almost nothing. A slight pressure shift. A modulation too structured to be random, too incomplete to be language. He sent it to Lena's slate without comment. She felt the transfer. Opened it. Listened. Her expression did not change. She replayed it once more, then closed the file. "What is it?" the talent observer asked. "Residual," Lena said. That was not untrue. It was also not sufficient. The observer accepted it, or chose to. Lena looked at Ilian. He gave a small, almost imperceptible movement of his head. Confirmation, not explanation. She turned back to the table. "We will proceed under observation," she said. The Huron delegate inclined their head. "Define observation." "We continue as if the condition is present," Lena said. "We do not engage it directly. We do not attempt to alter it." The Maritime Council representative considered. "And if it alters us?" Lena did not answer immediately. She let the question exist. Then she said, "Then we will have more information." The room accepted that. Not because it was satisfying, because it was the only option that did not require immediate action without understanding. Ilian watched the monitor. 32 kilos. He shifted his gaze to the chair. The indentation remained unchanged. He adjusted the environmental sensors again, this time focusing on thermal variation. The readout showed uniformity. No localized heat. No anomaly. He increased the resolution. The system hesitated for a fraction of a second, then complied. The data refined. Still nothing. He lowered the sensitivity. The number remained. 32 kilos. Lena returned to her seat. This time, she sat. The chair beneath her aligned perfectly with the floor seam. She placed both hands on the table, palms flat, fingers spread slightly. "We will resume," she said. The Huron delegate began again. Their voice carried the same measured tone as before. But the rhythm had changed. Not in the words. in the spacing between them. Each sentence allowed a fraction more time before the next, as if the room itself required it. The Talon observer listened. The Maritime Council representative took notes. Lena followed the argument, responded where necessary, guided the flow. The meeting continued. Minutes passed. The number held. 32 kilos. Then, without warning, it changed. Not gradually. Instantly. 40. Ilian's hand moved to the console. He did not touch it. He watched. 42. 45. The indentation deepened. This time, it was visible from across the table. The fabric compressed. The edges sharpened. The shape became more defined. Still not enough to describe, but no longer dismissible. The Huron delegate stopped speaking. Not abruptly. Their sentence reached its natural end. They did not begin another. The room held. The Talon observer's instrument flickered rapidly, then stabilized. The Maritime Council representative's pen paused above the page. Lena did not move. She did not look at the chair. She kept her gaze on the table. "What is the current reading?" she asked. Ilian answered. 45 kilos. Stable. For now. The number held. 45. The air in the room felt unchanged. The light remained steady. No sound accompanied the shift. Only the data, and the visible change in the seat. Lena spoke. "We will continue." The Huron delegate looked at her, a fraction of a second longer than before, then inclined their head. They resumed. Their voice carried the same tone. But now, every word was placed with greater care, as if the presence of something undefined required precision. The meeting adapted, not consciously, not formally, but in the way people adjust when the conditions of a room change without explanation. Ilian watched the monitor. 45 kilos. He adjusted the sampling rate again. The data remained consistent. No fluctuation, no drift. He checked the structural load distribution. The floor beneath the chair registered the weight. Not simulated, not inferred, measured. He looked at the chair, then at Lena, then back to the monitor. The number held. 45. Minutes passed. The meeting continued. Then, as quietly as it had begun, the change reversed. The number dropped. 40. 38. 32. It settled. The indentation eased. Not fully, but enough that it returned to its earlier state. The room did not react. Not outwardly. The Huron delegate continued speaking. The Talon observer listened. The Maritime Council representative wrote. Lena guided the discussion. Ilian watched the monitor. 32 kilos. The baseline. The condition. Unchanged. The meeting found its rhythm again. Not the original one. A new one. Adjusted. Accommodating. The chair remained. The seat remained. The weight remained. And the room continued to function around it. Outside, the gas giant turned. Inside, the chamber held. The meeting did not end so much as it reached a point where continuing would have been a formality. Lena closed her folder without signaling it as a conclusion. The Huron delegate completed a final sentence, then allowed the silence after it to remain. The Talon observer powered down their instrument. The Maritime Council representative aligned their notes one last time and placed the pen parallel to the page. No one announced adjournment. They stood in sequence. Chairs moved back from the table in controlled motions. The sound was soft, almost uniform. Each delegate performed the small gestures that marked departure. Inclined heads, brief acknowledgments, a final glance at the table as if confirming that what had been said would remain where it had been placed. Again, it happened in sequence. The Huron delegates left first. Their attention passed over the chair without lingering. The Talon observers followed, slower, one of them pausing just inside the doorway to look back once, not at the seat itself, but at the space above it. The Maritime Council departed last. Their lead representative stopped beside Lena for a fraction of a second. "Counselor," they said, "we will require a formal record." "You will have one," Lena said. The representative inclined their head and left. The doors closed. The chamber returned to its original quiet. The translation nodes powered down one by one, each emitting a soft, diminishing tone as the links dissolved. The overhead lights adjusted slightly, compensating for the absence of active participants. The air system shifted to a lower flow. Lena remained standing at the table. Ilian stayed at the console. The chair remained. The indentation remained. The number held. 32 kilos. Neither of them spoke immediately. The room felt different now. Not because of what had occurred. Because it had been witnessed. There was a difference. Ilian broke the silence. The reading stabilized after the delegates left. Lena nodded once. It didn't change during departure. No. Then the condition isn't dependent on observation. Or it is, but not in a way we understand. She moved along the table, stopping again at the chair. Up close, the indentation was subtle again. Less defined than during the peak, but still present. The fabric held the shape as if it had been taught to do so. She crouched. Not as before. More carefully. She studied the surface. The stitching at the rear seam. The slight variation in color where the fabric had been replaced. The way the light fell across it now, without the layered presence of multiple bodies in the room. I want to try something, she said. Ilian did not respond immediately. He watched her. Then he said, define it. Lena placed her slate on the floor beside the chair, angled so the camera faced the seat. Continuous recording, she said. Independent of the chamber system. He nodded. She adjusted the position by a few millimeters, aligning it with the floor seam. Then she stood. What kind of interaction? He asked. Minimal. That's not a category. It is for this. He considered that. Proceed. Lena stepped back from the chair. She walked to the sideboard, took one of the clean glasses, and filled it halfway from the sealed carafe. The water settled without disturbance. She returned, placed the glass on the table directly in front of the blank brass marker. Not on the chair, not touching it, aligned with the center. She adjusted it once, then left it. What does that test? Ilian asked. Nothing directly. Then why do it? She looked at the glass, then at the chair. Because it changes the context. He accepted that without further question. They waited. The room held. The number held. 32 kilos. Minutes passed. The glass remained still. The water surface did not move. The light remained constant. Ilian monitored the feed. No change. No variation. He shifted his attention to the translation node buffers again, running a deeper analysis on the earlier ghost line. The pattern resisted classification. It did not map to any known phonetic structure. It did not align with known interference signatures. It remained what it was, a pattern without a system. He sent the updated analysis to Lena. She glanced at it, closed it. Does it repeat? She asked. Not yet. Keep checking. He did. The room continued. Then, without warning, the glass moved. Not the water, the glass. It shifted, less than a millimeter, toward the chair. Lena saw it. Ilian saw it. Neither of them spoke. The number changed. 33, 34, 36. The indentation deepened. The fabric compressed. The glass moved again. Another fraction. Still aligned. Still upright. The water surface trembled once, then settled. Ilian stepped closer to the console. 40 kilos. Lena remained where she was. Her hands at her sides. Her posture unchanged. The number rose. 42. 45. The indentation matched the earlier peak. The shape defined itself again. Not fully, but enough. The glass moved a third time. Now clearly. A slow, deliberate shift. No vibration. No external force. Just displacement. It stopped. The water remained contained. No spill. No ripple beyond the initial movement. Ilian's voice was quiet. 45 kilos. Stable. Lena took one step forward, then stopped. She did not approach the chair. She did not reach for the glass. She let the moment exist. The room held. Then the translation nodes activated. Not all of them. One, the unit closest to the chair. It emitted a tone, not the standard activation chime. A variation, slightly off. Ilian turned. The node display flickered. Data streamed across it. Not language. Not code. The same pattern as before, but longer, more complete. He accessed it immediately. The system attempted to resolve. Failed. Attempted again. Failed. He routed the raw feed to his wrist display. Expanded it. The pattern shifted. Not randomly. Structured. As if it were trying to align with something. Lena stepped closer to the table. Play it, she said. He hesitated. Through the node? Yes. He adjusted the output, lowered the volume, then initiated playback. The sound filled the immediate space. Not loud, not intrusive, a series of modulated tones. Uneven, incomplete, but consistent. Lena listened, not for meaning, for structure. The pattern repeated, then altered, then repeated again. The glass moved, a final fraction, then stopped. The number held, 45 kilos. The indentation held. The sound continued. Lena spoke, not to the room, not to Ilian, to the pattern. Identify. The word was simple, clear. The translation node processed it, rendered it, fed it into the active channel. The pattern paused, not stopped, paused, then resumed. Different. Ilian's eyes moved across the display. The system attempted resolution again. This time, it found partial alignment. Not enough to classify. Enough to suggest direction. He adjusted the filter. Enhanced the signal. The pattern stabilized. Then, for the first time, the node produced output. Not a translation. A suggestion. A single word. Incomplete. Fragmented. But recognizable. See, the room held. The number held. 45 kilos. The indentation held. Lena did not move. Ilian did not speak. The word remained on the display. Then the pattern shifted again. The system attempted resolution. Failed. Attempted again. Failed. The output cleared. The sound diminished. The node returned to standby. The glass remained where it had moved. The water remained still. The number began to drop. 40. 38. 32. It settled. The indentation eased. The room returned to its baseline. Silence. Lena looked at the chair, then at the glass, then at Ilian. Record everything, she said. He nodded. Already doing it. She stepped back, returned to her seat. Saturday. Placed her hands on the table, aligned the edge of her folder, pressed it flat. The room held. The chair remained. The seat remained. Empty, but not. The glass stayed where it had stopped. Lena left it there. The water line had shifted a fraction from its original level, not from loss, but from the angle of the glass, now resting a degree off the table's perfect alignment. She noticed it each time she looked up from the folder. She did not correct it. Ilian had pulled a secondary recorder from his case and mounted it low against the wall, angled toward the chair and the table. It ran independently of the station network. A simple device. Light indicator steady. No interference. He had also muted the chamber's non-essential alerts. The room no longer spoke unless it had to. They did not call anyone back. No security. No administration. No additional observers. Not yet. The condition had changed when it was witnessed. That was clear. Bringing more people would change it again. They needed one shape of it before testing another. Lena turned a page in her folder and left it open, though she wasn't reading. The paper gave her a surface to return to between glances at the chair. Play it again, she said. Ilian didn't ask which part. He had isolated the segment where the node had produced the fragment. He routed it through a small speaker instead of the table nodes this time. The sound was thinner now, reduced, less insistent, still structured. The same pattern, but without the room's amplification. It ran once, stopped, ran again. He watched the waveform. Same intervals, he said. Does it change with time? Not in this loop. Then it's either fixed or waiting for input. He nodded. Try a different channel, she said. He switched outputs, sending the pattern into a translation node that had not been active before. The unit came online with its standard tone, processed the signal, and returned nothing. No response, he said, because it's not the same path, or not the same condition. Lena stood. She walked to the chair again, stopping at the same distance as before. The indentation was gone now. The fabric had returned to its resting shape. If she had entered the room at this moment, she might have doubted anything had happened, except for the glass. She looked at it, then at the brass marker, then at the space between them. Under Continuity Provision 7, she said quietly, not to Ilian this time. The seat is not to be occupied except by claimant or recognized human authority. Ilian did not respond. He watched the monitor. 32 kilos. Baseline. She reached for the glass. Stopped. Left it. Instead, she placed her hand on the table beside it. Flat. Palm down. Fingers spread slightly. The position was deliberate. Not touching the chair. not touching the glass. Within the same field. Record, she said. Already active. She kept her hand there. The room held. No change. The number held. 32 kilos. Seconds passed. Then the air shifted. Not temperature. Not pressure. Something else. A difference too small to define, but present in the way sound carried. The hum of the vents seemed to flatten. The space between surfaces felt closer. Ilian adjusted the environmental readout. No anomaly. But he did not look away from the chair. The number changed. 33, 34, 36. The indentation returned. Slower this time. More gradual. The fabric yielding as if to something easing into place. Lena did not move her hand. The glass remained still. The water line held. The number rose. 40, 42, 45. It stabilized. The indentation matched the earlier peak. The shape defined itself again. Lena spoke. Identify. The word was the same. The tone was not. Less directive. More measured. The translation node nearest the chair activated. The pattern returned. Stronger. More complete. Ilian watched the display. The system attempted resolution. Failed. Attempted again. This time, it held longer before failing. He adjusted the filter. Enhanced the signal. The pattern shifted. Aligned. Then broke. Then aligned again. Lena kept her hand on the table. Did not move. Did not reach. Did not withdraw. The glass moved. A fraction. Closer to her hand. Not to the chair. To the space between. The water trembled. Settled. Ilian's voice was low. 47 kilos. Higher than before. The number held. 47. The indentation deepened. Not dramatically, but enough to suggest a change in distribution. As if the weight had shifted again. The pattern in the node stabilized. For longer. The system found partial alignment. Held it. Extended it. The output appeared. Not a single word this time. 2. Fragmented. Incomplete. But clear enough. Seat occupied. The translation was not perfect. The system marked it with uncertainty. But the structure held. Lena closed her eyes for a fraction of a second. Opened them. Did not move her hand. Ilian watched the monitor. 47 kilos. Stable. The glass moved again. This time toward her fingers. Stopped just short of contact. The water line tilted. Held. No spill. The room remained silent. The pattern continued. Then altered. The system struggled. Aligned. Broke. Aligned again. The output flickered. Another fragment. Present. The word appeared. Held. Then vanished. The pattern collapsed. The node returned to standby. The sound faded. The number began to drop. 45. 42. 38. 32. It settled. The indentation eased. The glass remained where it had moved. Closer now. Not touching. Lena lifted her hand. Slowly. The air shifted back. The hum returned to its previous shape. She stepped back. Not abruptly. Not cautiously. Just enough to change the space. Ilian exhaled once. Quiet. Controlled. He checked the recordings. All channels captured, he said. Redundancy? 3 independent streams. Good. She looked at the chair. Then at the glass. Then at the brass marker. No inscription. No name. Just the space where one would be. Continuity provision 7, she said. Ilian glanced at her. She did not look at him. If the seat is occupied, she said, then the provision is engaged. Define recognized human authority, he said. She considered that. Not quickly. Not slowly. With the same care she applied to every word in the chamber. Recognition, she said, is not always mutual. He absorbed that. Did not respond. Outside the chamber, the station moved through its cycle. Traffic shifted. Schedules adjusted. Other rooms filled and emptied. Inside, the chair remained. The seat remained. Empty to the eye. Occupied to the system. Lena walked back to her place at the table. She did not sit immediately. She aligned the edge of her folder. Pressed it flat. Adjusted it by a millimeter. Then sat. Ilian powered down the speaker. Left the recorders running. Muted the console. The room returned to quiet. Not the same quiet as before. A different one. Structured. Defined. They did not speak again. Not because there was nothing to say. Because anything said would have required choosing a shape for what had happened. And neither of them was ready to do that. The glass remained slightly out of line. The water held. The chair stayed centered on the floor seam. Perfect, as if it had never been otherwise. Lena rested her hands on the table, looked at the space across from her, did not look away. The room held, and somewhere within it, something that did not need to be seen remained exactly where it had chosen to be.